I will start telling a story. It's a true story. When I was 6 years old, my father built a flat concrete house in 1968. It was one of the first houses built in my village with a flat concrete roof. And this is a trend which we saw it in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. The entire landscape of India, both cities and rural areas, were pasted with Western models of architecture. My father, at that time, we thought to have a concrete house is a dream of any of the families. And it is considered to be a status symbol. We could see many buildings where traditional vernacular architecture was there. They converted it with concrete facades, flat roof concrete facades. But we realized soon that the building was unbearably hot during the summer. We had to cut tree leaves and put it on top of our terrace to at least stay inside the village. But at the same time, the houses built with mangrove tiles and thatch and everything was thermally very comfortable. People were able to live very comfortably in those houses. All the buildings which came across India in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and later completely neglected the local climate, completely neglected the local materials which were used previously, and completely neglected the local techniques which were used in those times. What could see was a flat concrete roof. It was blindly following the Western model. You could see glass facades everywhere, which is there. You cannot distinguish between a building coming up in Chennai from what is coming up in Bangalore, in Assam, or in Delhi, or Mumbai, or Ahmedabad. Everything looked the same. Or else what came up in Chile, or Indonesia, or Africa, or Europe looked the same. The glass buildings let in all the heat inside, and we had air conditioning to solve that problem. In thought process in the 90s and 20s, 20s and 30s was that we need not design according to the climate. We can artificially create an environment, thermally comfortable environment inside the building. What happened with the concrete is something which you see. Every day the concrete has to expand at daytime when the temperature reaches 40 degrees. At night when the temperature reaches 25 degrees, it has to contract, and this is happening on a day-by-day basis. And there was, over a period of time, the cracks develop in the concrete, and what you see is the second photo, the reinforcement starts corroding, plaster starts flaking off. It has become a real problem in the thing. In 1973, Architectural Review, in one of their articles, called it flat roof scandal. The survey done by them showed that 1/3 of the concrete buildings started developing leaks after some time. If the workmanship is very bad, the leaks start showing in 5 years. Even if the workmanship is very good, the leaks start showing in 20 or 30 or 40 years. And this is becoming, I will say that this is one of the biggest crises the construction industry is facing now. I mean, you can see the construction chemicals company and the waterproofing companies making a huge reap out of their products. Asbestos was one of the building materials which came in the latter half of the 19th century, became very popular in the 20th century beginning. People thought that this is a problem, we have solved the roofing problem because it's a material which is fire resistant, doesn't decay, very hard, withstands, durable, all those things. But it was in 1960s and 70s and 80s that we realized that asbestos causes cancer called asbestiasis. Many of the countries in Europe and the Western world banned the use of asbestos by the end of the 20th century. India is also controlled the use of asbestos unless it is in very simple in some of the material. So what has been considered as a wonderful building material became a curse in the future. Similarly, we thought that air conditioning will solve our thermal comfort issues. We started the typical kind of air conditioning that what we see today has come in 1930s, and it is till 1960s and 70s we did not realize that the gas which is used for air conditioning is depleting the ozone layer, which is causing the ultraviolet rays and other harmful rays to come into the atmosphere. So the gas chlorofluorocarbons is banned now. 2020, all the European countries have stopped using it, but India is still allowed, as per the Kyoto Protocol, we are still allowed to use the chlorofluorocarbons till 2040. So this is also one of the cases where the air conditioning is not the solution that we are looking at. Formaldehyde. The plywoods became very used, and formaldehyde used in many other building materials. Plywoods has formaldehyde. Only very recently in India, you get plywoods without formaldehyde. Much later, we found out that formaldehyde is a carcinogen. So all these things, the technology. What I'm trying to tell that technology and science cannot compensate a poorly thought out design and the way we look at things. Some of the modern materials, some of the modern techniques, we realize decades later that the material is harmful to the thing. What we need to understand is that technology failed to find a sustainable solution in this era of climate change for the many issues we are facing. The global warming and climate change is going up and down, up and up. We are not able to control it in a proper manner. In this time, we have to look at vernacular architecture. Vernacular architecture is architecture which has evolved over centuries or years on decades or in a place based on the local climate, local materials available, local techniques, and the cultural context. And it's very, very important that various people call vernacular architecture with various other names. Some call it rural architecture, non-pedigree architecture, anonymous architecture, folk architecture. But Bernard Rudovsky brought the attention of the world in his book 1964. He's called it Architecture Without Architects. So that's the cover page of the book which he has written. Now, if you look at back the vernacular architecture, the whole architectural education, the whole architects look down upon vernacular architecture. That is why what we have seen in all these few decades, but is the vernacular architecture primitive? I will say no. There is a lot of things which we can learn about vernacular architecture. Craftsmanship is very important in vernacular architecture. This is something which we don't find in modern architecture. Craftsman does not talk about architecture, he creates it. Looking at our old temples and churches and historic buildings, we realize the importance of craftsmanship. And this is quoted by Hassan Fathy. The kind of modern architecture which we tended to use, the social content of the architecture has been drained away. The community is not there. The people are not there. Architecture is for people. And Corbusier said, in his book 1920s, which he has written, the book titled The City of Tomorrow, he said 85% should be forest and only 15% should be built up. What we see in modern architecture later, the so-called followers of Le Corbusier built up 85% of the spaces and only 15% was left as open spaces. And that is the context that what we as a firm look at vernacular architecture. As a practice, we try to look at vernacular architecture in a positive. What are the lessons we can learn from vernacular architecture? This is one of the buildings in the Palpanappuram Palace. And if you look at this building, what you see is the roof. Roof is a very predominant expressive element in vernacular architecture in many of the cultures. I'm talking more reference to the tropical humid climate, which is like Kerala, parts of Tamil Nadu, parts of even Mumbai, for example. And people talk about roofless millions because making a roof is the most difficult thing in architecture to be done. I can see the different levels, how they played with the roof in the vernacular architecture, these things. The other important thing is that the vernacular architecture is built with impermanent material, the way we look at things. They built mud, they used timber for the walls, but there were verandas around the building to protect the walls from tremendous the summer heat. You look at this building, the sun's rays never hits the inside walls of the rooms because the verandas protect them. You look at the modern buildings that has come up in our cities where there are no sunshades. I mean, the glass let in all the heat. There is no roof you can see in our modern architecture buildings. There is no overhang of the roof which you can see. but this overhang of the roof and the verandas became very, very critical buildings. So it's not only the roof in modern buildings which transmit heat inside, it is the walls also transmit heat inside, and we try to do air conditioning, but we know that going too it will not be detrimental for the climate change, and looking at the issues of climate change, go with this. And look at this building, which is more than 200 years old, built with timber walls. The overhang is what determines the durability of the buildings. It protects the walls from direct sunlight hitting the walls as much as possible. This is a building which is in the heart of the Trivandrum city. And one more important thing, in a hot, humid climate, cross ventilation is very important. And when you used to have very little furniture in the olden days, you need to get ventilation right up the floor level. This is one of the buildings with timber walls outside. Timber jalis are used. I mean, if you, places where stone is abundant, they use stone jalis, including some buildings in Ahmedabad. When you sit on the floor, you need to get ventilation right at the bottom, because in a humid climate, cross wind movement is very, very critical. So they designed these buildings with beautiful techniques. I mean, this is a black oxide flooring. I mean, not even black oxide. They used the coconut black and they used it. And the flooring, the ventilation used to be at the bottom. And we are looking, and if you look at the palaces or the rich man's houses who were built like that, you look at the poor man's houses spotted across Kerala, they also had the roof as a prominent element. They had the windows, they had the cross ventilation, and the same principle is used. This building, which is in my village, belongs to our teacher, school teacher. Before the schools, we used to go to a kalari where we learned the basic letters, writing the letters. It's one of the schools there. And the roof, the tree which you see in front, is the roofing material. He grows that tree to roof the house, and the roofs, the thatch covering is replaced once in 4 years. I'm not trying to take a romantic view of the vernacular architecture. I don't think that everything vernacular is great. This is laterite. In the olden days, you used to build laterite buildings. 80% of Kerala is covered with laterite. You dig up the earth and build a laterite house with laterite. But over a period of 30 years or 40 years, the pit gets covered up. But now what has happened, it has become laterite quarries. I mean, stone buildings. I used to use a lot of stone buildings in my practice. The buildings, I'm not showing some of the buildings that we have done in the coming slides. I mean, the stone slides, the stone walls. Now, latest studies have shown that stone quarries cause landslides. So we have to look at those issues. So everything, whatever is good in the Western architecture or the modern architecture, we should use it. And that is very important. Vernacular architecture should not be copied as a style, but as a vast knowledge system, which is very, very important. If you want to put up a Chettinad style of house, putting 2 Chettinad type of columns will not bring the Chettinad concept. So you have to go deeper into it, and that is what we try to do. What we do in our office, we interpret the knowledge system. We look at the crafts. We look and adapt these ideas into a modern building or a contemporary building that we are trying to do. And timber is one of the most sustainable building materials which you can have. We use timber in many of our buildings, even not very recently when we talked about sustainable architecture. We have been using timber for the last 3 decades. And if you look at sustainable architecture and look at all the steps that is happening now, the only thing we can reverse the climate change is only trees. Trees can convert the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere into oxygen. Only trees can do it. All other steps that you take in the name of the sustainable architecture will only slow down the process. Instead of your children being affected, it will be your grandchildren being affected. And trees forms the best sunshade. And it gives a lot of, birds can live, and that is very important. And when you use more and more timber in buildings, carbon gets locked in timber. Carbon is stored in timber. When you use it as a firewood, carbon dioxide is emitted to the atmosphere. When you allow timber to decay, carbon dioxide is emitted as part of the carbon cycle, which we learn in schools. And also another important practice that we do conservation of so many projects. And it's very, very important to recycle the building as a whole, reuse the building as a whole. This is a mosque which we have recently conserved. And look at the buildings we're using the roof as a very important element. As I said, I mean, this is one of the Dakshina Chitra what we have done. This is also, the roof is very prominent. We try to use roof as an expressive element in the kind of architecture we do. We use courtyards as an element, which is very, very important. Many of the IT buildings, you go there, when you come out of the building, you see that it has rained outside. You don't know whether it's day or night or whether it has rained or not. Courtyard is a very important principle from the traditional. We use courtyards in our elements. We use verandas in our buildings because these are the things which we use as a, I mean, these are the verandas which are used in our buildings very much. Athangudi tiles or Chettinad tiles, these are handmade tiles. Doesn't require even a 1 watt of electricity in making it. There is no firing involved. It's a handmade tile, beautiful tiles. We used to have these kind of tiles 100 years ago. And this is another building which we have done with the typical kind of Athangudi or Chettinad tiles which is there. And this is a building. You have to have, when you have a tropical humid climate, you have to put the windows at the lower level at the floor. If you want to sit down or lie down, then the windows has to be given at the wind doesn't know that there is a person lying on the floor. It will not take a path accordingly, and that is very important. We have a rich variation within our country. What we have in the modern architecture, we have only one kind of architecture. And this is the point which we have to look at, whether we want to look at our rich heritage or not. Our students are not taught about earth or timber as a building material. I mean, they are taught from the Western textbooks. The craftsmen went in one way, the modern architecture and engineering education went in another way. We learn about drawbacks of cement, but we don't learn about advantages of lime as a building material. And so I mean, we know that traditional building lasts for hundreds of years, there are evidences, but the kind of modern buildings which are come up doesn't last that much. What we need is a reinterpretation of vernacular architecture. That is very important. Take the best elements and use it for creating a sustainable architecture, which is the need of the hour. You know that climate is changing, global warming is there, and it is that London experienced 40.3 degrees, which is the highest temperature recorded in London. I mean, this is the case of most of the European cities. I was in Italy in July, and the emergency was declared in Italy at that time because of in Indian cities also went through it. I'm not taking a blind opposition to the Western models, but my opposition is to blind following of the Western model. And our planet is very fragile. We must address this it's a man-made problem. Climate change and global warming is a man-made problem. We must address this human-driven climate emergency, and we should look at ecological restoration. Our architecture should take this path, which is very, very important. And we will not be learning from the Western model. We will be learning from our own heritage, our own past, and our own architecture, which we can always say it's our architecture. We must challenge the practices and to create a sustainable future for the future generation and for everybody. And climate change is around the corner. Global warming is a reality. We should make use of the 21st century know-how in creating an architecture which is sustainable. And what I will say, what is the need of the hour is to have a sustainable vernacularism, movement which is required at present. And this is not blindly following the Western model. We should learn from the past. And if we don't do it, we will be making the same mistake we made when we followed the modern architecture. We should not have an international style of sustainable architecture. Thank you.